Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Opapari, and this is the Songwriters on Process podcast. Since 2010, I've been interviewing songwriters about their writing process. And on this podcast, we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process, far deeper than the usual. Do you start with the lyrics or the music question? By way of background, I have a PhD in English literature, and I'm a prose writer myself. I'm not a songwriter. In fact, I've never written a song in my life. But my goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers and poets, just as writers, plain and simple. And I've always been interested in the writing process. This is an intelligent conversation between two writers. And on this podcast, like I said, we go deep into the process. We talk about rituals, the seeds of inspiration, the role of movement on the process, writer's block, the revision process, pens, pencils, types of paper, and of course, we talk about books. You can find all the archived interviews on the Songwriters on Podcast website and across all streaming platforms. And with that, let's dive into this week's episode. And today on the podcast, we have Mike Doughty of Soul Coughing. This is an archive interview. I did this 3 years ago with him in 2021, and it is on the Songwriters on Process YouTube page because you can actually watch the interview there. But this is the first time it's been in podcast form. And what better time? There's no better time, I should say, to post a Mike Doughty interview because Soul Coughing is going back on the road. I believe it's the first tour in 25 years. And what's really cool is that not only are the venues selling out across the board, they're having to upgrade the venues to bigger places because of the ticket demand. So again, this is from 2021. And, I've done, I think at this point, 400 interviews, over 14 years at this point. And there are some answers I get that I will never forget. And honest to God, this is one of them. Again, I do these so often, but there are some answers I get where I think I'm never going to forget that. And this is one of them. So Doughty he journals every day. He journals in the morning, and at night. But here's his process. He does the dream journaling in the morning on an old IBM Electric typewriter. Then in the evening, it's on a 38-year-old Apple IIe computer. Actually, now it's 41 years old because this was 3 years ago. And I'm just going to repeat that because it's so amazing. And he says that in the morning, it's on a IBM Electric typewriter because what he says is that the blank white page is filled with light and hope. And then in the evening, it's on the 41-year-old Apple IIe computer because he says the glowing green has a definite night vibe. And I know this was three years ago, so I hope this is still true, but he saves those evening journal entries on a 5-inch floppy disk. I guess I don't know what else you'd save it on with a 38-year-old computer. I guess maybe cassettes. But that's amazing. I love that. And he says you've got to have that discipline every day to write. But I love that routine. Oh, I love that answer. Anyway, enough of that. Here is my interview with Mike Doughty of Soul Coughing, and go check him out on the road. There seems to be in the past year this idea that once we get out of this, you're going to have so many songs because all you've been doing is creating, and it'll be a great time for artists. And there was an article in the Washington Post a couple of months ago by the theater critic Peter Marks, and he talked about that. He can't wait to see what comes up from this. And my experience talking to songwriters has been that's not the case. So I guess the bigger issue here is it easy for you? How easy is it for you to write under great emotional weight? Like not just this time, but in general, does emotional weight make it easier for you to write or harder?
I actually have had an extremely productive pandemic. Like right out of the gate, I started like writing every day, and I was really excited because I'm an isolator by nature. Yeah. And, I'm happy to, just have time by myself. And, so it was great. I do a Patreon thing where I do a new song every week. It's like pretty hardcore, prolific vibes. And I'm like 35 songs deep, in terms of like my backlog. I have like 10 really great weeks. I have 15 okay weeks, and then 10 weeks that are like passable. But I have a lot of backlog. I finished a book in quarantine. I learned how to mix trap music. Like I went on this YouTube hole of like figuring out how to do the sounds and what compressors to use and like that kind of stuff. Produce an album for a rap artist. It's not done yet. But this being said, about 2 months ago, I hit a wall, and then just one day I woke up and didn't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And I am not exactly sure why it happened, but the story most people have been telling is one of it being a very confusingly foggy time for the writing process, despite everybody's day being fully wide open. And I in the past 3 months, I really experienced that. Now, in terms of the weight, there's this is a very different kind of weight because it's like the hidden enemy. So much of the horror of it is indistinct. um you know and it's been very like I don't know, like I lived through 9/11, and that was like a moment of wait. This is like a surreal kind of, I know something's going on, but is something going on? And is this circulating in my community? Is it not circulating in my community? And I don't know that I've felt it as scary, just confusing and baffling, and so indistinct. I would say it's light, like unbearable lightness of being, kind of light, rather than being a weight on me, for me.
So I was going to ask you about deadlines, and now I was thinking about how well, because of big expanses of time, artists not touring, is it easier to write under deadline, or do you get, or is it easier to write either under deadline or with large expanses of time? But now, as I'm hearing you say with the Patreon and with writing songs every week, that's a deadline. Right. So
yeah.
How has that been? Like, do you find that's been good for you to write? Does that impetus to, I've got to have it, I've got to create? Is that a good way to create, or do you typically need more distance to be able to create?
Oh, I love a deadline. I absolutely love it. And
you always have?
Yes, I think I always have. This is the Patreon thing is very much like a kind of 60s putting out singles vibe, maybe a 50s putting out singles, because you're just constantly trying to generate something that's going to get onto the proverbial radio.
Yeah.
And so I've always been prolific, but this really there has stakes. Like, I got to come up with something that's gonna get in front of people. It's not just a question of dashing something off. It's got to be ready.
Yeah.
And so it's the deadline is a huge part of it, but it's also just the fact that, like, I'm not just like writing a bunch of songs and then finding a purpose for them later. It's like it's going out. It's like out the door on Saturday.
Yeah, that's it. Some people, I think artists especially, find that deadline to be antithetical to the creative process. But I can see how maybe doing that every week, right? You have no choice. You got to have it done.
Yeah,
you've done 30. You said 35 of them.
Yeah, well, I've been doing Patreon for a few years, so I've got like 260 odd total songs. I'm just saying like the backlog that I have.
Yeah, the backlog. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got a 35 song backlog.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Um, how much writing do you do outside of songwriting, whether it's journaling? I know you said you wrote a book, but how much of that is a part of your daily creative routine?
Well, I haven't been doing great with it late, but when I'm on the good foot, I get up and I do a dream journal every morning on an old IBM Electric typewriter. And then at night, I do kind of an end of the day journal on an Apple IIe vintage 1983 computer. It just, I mean,
Excellent.
there's no rhyme or reason to using these devices, but I just like them. But that being said, I have not been on the good foot for months. Like it just, I haven't been doing it. Haven't been productive for a long ass time.
So, what does the dream journal involve when you're doing it?
Just a recounting of the dream, every detail that I can remember. Oftentimes it's out of sequence because it's just as it comes back to me. But the more I dream journal, the more often I dream journal, the more I remember. It just has I think there's a quality of like flattering the unconscious, so it gives up more details if it knows you're paying attention to it.
Right. Do you mine those for song ideas ever?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I mine everything. Pardon me. I'm going to walk while I let my dog inside. I mine everything for phrases.
Okay.
And so I'm not looking for themes per se. I'm just looking for little linguistic, gems. And I keep sort of an ongoing list of those. And then when I'm in the process, I open up I just have pages on my phone, with a long list of them, and I just go through them and plug them into various places in the song.
So, do you go to that list when you're in a rut, or is that like a standard part of the routine that every time you write a song, you're going to go to that list?
Oh, it's part of the routine. I mean, I don't always take something from the list, but yeah, I mean, I'm always going through it, especially like chorus ideas and things that are like sort of linchpin phrases for the lyric. I often, chorus or not, I usually find on that list.
Are you, or I'm fascinated by this because this is some songwriters. I actually had some Brian Fallon. I interviewed him a couple of months ago, and Brian Fallon told me that if any songwriter ever tells you that they go back to their phones and look at the notes section, they're lying. He goes, "I have hundreds of those." He goes, "I've never touched them one." He goes, "They're all lying." Now I will say that I don't think any songwriter has agreed with him, but I thought it was hilarious. He goes, "Yes, I have hundreds of voice memos. I never go back." So, but it sounds like you do.
I do. I mean, I have a ton of fragments of guitar parts and melodic ideas and beats and stuff like that. That like they're just too many to get to.
Right.
In order to sort of get them in rotation, I have to finish them a little bit. But the stuff, the chord progressions I wrote into my phone 5 years ago, like those are never see
the light of day.
Never see the light of day.
But I have heard the list thing a lot. So is this list organized at all? Like, are you organizing this by any kind of theme or topic or emotion? I imagine that's a long list after a while. So
no, it's just as they come up, like literally like I'll go through a journal entry with a pencil and there'll be like 2 or 3 words here and there, that just sound good together, feel good together. And it's just a running list of these fragments.
And then it's at the end of the day, then that's kind of the end of the day journal where it just kind of like recounts the day's events. I think you said that's the one you do on the Apple.
Yeah, it's more the beginning of the day stuff, the dream journaling that I get stuff from, and stuff that I write just during the day that I'll, just like write on a piece of paper, whatever's close to me or on my phone. Yeah. But the thing about the great thing about journaling on the Apple is it's never going to get out of that machine. Like there's no, like I save it on a literal like floppy disk, like a
Floppy.
5-inch floppy disk, and like it's never coming out of it. It's gonna, it's. I mean, the ideal of journaling is a thing that is an exercise you don't necessarily go back to. It is absolutely well suited for that.
So you and I are the same age. So, of a practical perspective, where are you getting these floppy disks from? Do you have like, do they sell them anymore?
I got when I bought the Apple IIe, it came with a big thing of like like games and like different
Right.
programs and stuff like that. So I've just been like formatting those discs and using those. Right. Yeah.
So just so I'm clear on this, that's the end of this is the stuff you write at the end of the day.
Apple IIe is end of the day. Yeah.
And do those things ever make it into your songs too, or is that just kind of like a processing way for you?
That's more of a processing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just those soothing green letters on the screen. And,
How old is the Apple IIe?
83.
Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah. Yep.
So do you think it's important to create every day, even when maybe you're not feeling it, to kind of push through? Or are there days when you just say, I'm not feeling it, like creating, and whether it's music or writing or anything like that? How important is it to create every day for you?
Well, so I guess I'm sort of attached to the Protestant work ethic, which I think there's a big note of toxic masculinity in there. I mean, I think of, like I should write, shoulding on myself, have to write every day, got to do a thing every day. And I believe in that. And I believe in discipline, but I've gotten a little skeptical of, the any kind of artist that like what they underline is like, I work hard. That's my thing. I work hard. I guess I do work pretty hard.
Yeah.
But I try not to fetishize it. What I've been able to do lately is just practicing guitars, just putting up instrumentals and just like playing guitar solos and practicing and working on my little filigree things that I can do. And I definitely will, in this time period where things feel so futile on some days, I definitely like being able to look back and say, I did this today. There was a thing I did today. Yeah.
A sense of accomplishment then.
Yeah. Something like that.
So I'm fascinated by the rituals of artists, things they have to have with them, time of day, place. So here's what I'm thinking. What if you would you be able to switch it up and do the end of the day journal on the typewriter and the dream journal on the Apple? Like I say that because I think there are certain things I need to have with me to be productive as a writer. Like whether that's superstitious, like, do I need this pen? I write with this pen. Do I need to be in that chair? It probably doesn't make me more productive, but if I think that it does, that probably works. So yeah, I mean, I'm curious, like how important is that ritual, the ritualistic part of the process for you? Environment, time of day, place, things like that.
Well, I like working in the morning. I like having that first cup of coffee and then
now define morning, because morning for songwriters can be like noon.
Morning, like 8:30. Like 8:30 is like a good time. I mean, I've been sleeping till 10 for a couple of months, which is like Pasha-like behavior in my book for me. Kind of scary actually. But yeah, like whenever I get up, just work when I'm up. Yep. Just like first cup of coffee, at least like on the computer, like going through tracks I've been working on. Generally speaking, if I'm not active like immediately in the day, I'm not going to be active later in the day.
Yeah.
And I just kind of die out at like 2 p.m., like the 2 to 5 p.m. time period. And, it's sort of like if something significant hasn't been completed by then, it's just not going to happen.
Can you write for long stretches, or do you got to take breaks?
Um, I think when I'm doing it right, like I forget to eat, forget to go to the bathroom,
I've heard that. Yeah.
I'm just completely what I've been writing for the past couple of years is rap. Like I started working with rappers and
Yeah.
just began to sort of envy them. And they're all freestylers and they would come over and I'd put up a beat and they'd go for like half an hour and 15 minutes of it would be great.
Yeah.
And I can't do that. It literally takes me like 8 hours to write 16 bars, which they dash off in a minute and a half. But that's a very obsessive process. That's the kind of thing that I'm sitting there like scratching out one word, adding another. It's very meticulous work. So that I can forget like time and place while I'm doing.
Is there a room that you like to write in, or does that not matter?
Oh, I have like a little studio room.
Oh, you do? Okay. So
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I guess my question earlier, what if we switched it up? Like, would that cause you, if I said to you, okay, Mike, you got to write that dream journal's got to go on the Apple IIe because the Selectric is going in the shop.
I mean the white page is sort of filled with light and hope. So I think if I didn't have the typewriter, I'd go to a journal and handwrite it. And then the Apple IIe, like that glowing green 80s font, that really is a night vibe. So I think that I would feel profoundly unsettled if I had to, I love light.
Yeah.
So I want to be somewhere where there's natural light coming into the window when I first wake up anyway. So I think on that level, it would feel creepy sitting in, on that dark little computer with a little flashing cursor.
Right. So very few songwriters have told me they use typewriters. So what is it about the typewriter? Is it hearing the smack of the keys? What is it about it that makes it so? Because the ones that do swear by it.
Oh, I love it. I mean, the Selectric 2 was like the stock office typewriter of the 70s and 80s. It's what I learned typing on in typing class in high school. It sort of like buzzes and hums.
Oh, right.
It just feels great. The sound of the bell is great. And there's just something about feeling those words coming out under your hands and feeling something concrete happening that is great. Just very, very different from, extremely different from writing on a laptop. That's for damn sure.
So do you ever write lyrics with a pen and paper, or are you strictly a typewriter guy?
I do. I mean, so I write, so like I'll free write on the Selectric 2, then I will have like a word processor file open on the computer next to Ableton. So I'll be writing like the lyrics on that. Then I like to actually type out the completed lyric on the typewriter before I record the first version of the vocal. But yeah, it's not like I've had one constant process that I've stuck to for many, many years. Oftentimes I'll write in a notebook or I've done the process where I write on the word processor, but then it has to be written in pen in the notebook before I sing it.
I could do an entire website dedicated to the pens, the brand of pens, the color of ink, and the paper that songwriters use. I have never heard a group so possessive in particular. I mean, some swear by it, only a certain type of ink, certain type of pen.
Sure.
Does that matter to you at all?
Well, I like a flowy pen. Right. Not like a ballpoint. Just feels really cheap to me.
Really?
Yeah, I got this amazing notebook in Italy made by Pinator.
Hmm.
who, yeah, like it was one of those stores, like super chic stores that sold like a belt, a bag, a notebook, and like
Oh no.
that was it. And each thing was under a spotlight and cost $1 million.
Right.
And
Right.
I went over there. I was like, I want to get a dope notebook out of this experience. And then I didn't find one until like the third to last day, and it was like, holy shit, this, they wrapped it up and so meticulously in all this paper
Right.
and put it in a box, and yeah, it's fabulous.
I would feel like that'd be more pressure. I'd be terrified to write in that thing. It's like I'd feel like it's better sitting on a shelf, So
Oh, I love messing it up. I
oh, you
love
do.
turning it into a ratty, you know, appears to have been thrown around a room, if not the garden, looking notebook.
Right. How about the role of movement? Do you ever get ideas? A lot of songwriters have told me whether it's walking or hiking or biking or any exercising or even, I interviewed Stone Gossard from Pearl Jam a couple of
Mm,
months ago. And he told me how it's really interesting. He has this theory about the cadence, how he said the cadence of the limbs actually contributes to, that cadence actually gives him song ideas, the swinging of the limbs.
sure, I can see that.
Yeah. And a lot of songwriters will, I'm not a swimmer, but they swear by swimming. Swimming is a way, the rhythm gives them ideas. So does that ever happen to you at all? Like whether it's being outside in some form of movement ever generate song ideas?
I think I often come up with great little nuggets of ideas when I'm doing something else,
Yeah.
when I'm completely not in the songwriting process. So it's not that I'm moving or that I'm outside or whatever. It's just that I'm completely divorced in the moment from writing songs. Like I don't know, like doing some sort of necessary physical labor, or
Mhm.
driving, or something like that, something where I'm not um where I'm supposed to be focused on something else, I guess is the way to say it.
Yeah, I've heard gardening tends to be a
Gardening.
popular activity that
Mm.
songwriters get ideas. And the guy who's the guy that writes Dilbert, Scott Adams. I remember
Oh,
years ago he wrote an art, not that long ago, but in the Wall Street Journal about he says boredom is a necessary component of the creative process. I think, like you're saying, it's that when we try to think of these things, like when I write, I think my greatest, what I would consider to be my great lines, have never ever come to me when I'm about to write them. They're always
right,
when
right.
I'm doing something else.
Sure.
Yeah. And so do you revise a lot of your lyrics? How important is revision when it comes time to writing lyrics?
Well, I feel like my like I'll write a song, and then a poetry teacher of mine once would say about a poem, he'd be like, that poem is a life support system for one killer line. And so I try and like look at the song and be like, okay, there's one good thing in here, and I can take that out and plug it into a different song. So oftentimes my songs will be like amalgams of three or four different songs.
Hmm.
And as the months go by, they'll kind of congeal into more compact forms.
Are you willing to sacrifice when it comes time to revising? Are you willing to sacrifice meaning in a line for the sake of melody? Which reigns supreme? Is it the melody? Are you willing to change a word if it means changing the meaning for the sake of the melody?
I feel like I've more often made a difficult decision to go with the meaning
Hmm.
than
Really?
like it's like more often a song is outside of what I had intended it to be, and then it shows itself as being a song about something other than what I thought it was about. Or oftentimes like showing insecurity in a song, is often like the song is just going towards a vulnerable place, and I just don't want to be in a vulnerable place. But I mean, in general, I think the sound, and very much the sound of the words, is reigns supreme. Um, so I would not have. I mean, sometimes it's difficult, but I don't have a problem doing that. Don't have a problem editing with a mind for making the melody better.
So let's end with this because songwriters are, for the most part, voracious readers. And you already mentioned poetry. I could probably count on the number of, on one hand, the number of songwriters I've interviewed who read poetry. When I interviewed Daniel Lanois last week, I was so happy because he and I talked about Yeats, and I was like, no songwriter has ever mentioned Yeats. Um, and I don't know, it always amazes me that songwriters don't read poetry at all. But anyway, I guess, what are your reading habits like? How much do you get to read? Who are some of your favorite authors, like regardless of genre?
Well, I mean, my favorite books are a lot of poetry books.
Yeah.
The Great Fires by Jack Gilbert. I'm reading David Ignatov right now. I've never read him before. And when I read poetry, like I read one poem a day basically, because the more you read, the less you get out of it with poetry.
Yeah.
You need to have some pretty extreme focus. But I mean, I love John Cheever. I love Carson McCullers.
Yeah.
I love Borges. Borges is my dude.
Yeah.
Everything and Nothing. Love that.
Now I love Carson McCullers too, but let's talk about her. So why? Yeah. What about that writing appeal? What did you like?
Well, I can the short story Sucker is my favorite of hers because it's so fucking creepy, and it turns from this kind of sibling drama that's sort of heartbreaking into like this scary like murder story. And I love the character of John Henry, the little kid who dies of encephalitis in a Member of the Wedding.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry if I just spoiled Member of the Wedding for something.
No. I'm trying to think, I don't know if I've read that. Yeah. I mean, what have I read? I mean, I've read stuff of hers. I just don't, I love her, but I don't hear that her name very often. Unfortunately.
Oh yeah, no, she's great.
Yeah. So the poets then, um, does the poetry ever influence your songwriting, or is that separate?
The poetry actually influences the prose more.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, believe it or not. Because I mean, poetry is very much based in meaning, whereas the songs are very much based in sound. And it's really the sound of the words and what the sounds of the words evoke, much more than trying to get a feeling down on the page, which I think is the essential nature of poetry.
It seems like the novelists that are always come up with songwriters, Cormac McCarthy, Bukowski, and Von.
Yep.
Those are the big three. And Raymond Carver
sure
comes up
too.
Yeah. I mean, because of the word economy, it kind of makes sense, right? I mean,
sure. And the fact that in a song, you really can sort of like establish a scenario, establish a situation, and then have some sort of elliptical denouement. You can't really I not a lot of songwriters can really tell a point A to point B story. And that's very Carver, it sort of drifts into the mist at the end of the story.
Yeah, and the wordplay too, and people like Vonnegut, right? I
Hmm.
mean, it's just,
Hmm.
I mean, all those. Yeah. So, any other poets? I love talking about poetry. I just don't get to talk about it with songwriters that often. But yeah. Anyone? I think you mentioned a couple, but any other favorites?
Well, Sylvia Plath,
Yeah.
Alan Dugan is my guy.
Okay.
Love Alan Dugan. Borges, who I mentioned, is absolutely huge for me. Um, Paul Celan, I love.
Yeah.
Joan Murray, I like. Oh, I mean, of course. But then there's a lot of playwrights that are meaningful to me as well. Like David Mamet's very meaningful to me.
Now we're talking because thank you. I've done the site for 10 years and you're the first songwriter. So my PhD is in 20th century American theater. So thank you very much.
Oh,
This is like this is a watershed moment for me. 10 years I've done this freaking site, and you're the first one I think I can talk about playwrights with.
yes. There you go.
Thank you. Well, Mammoth makes sense. I mean, right. I mean, just the dialogue. I mean, I can
Oh,
see
yeah.
how that would be how songwriters would have but who else? So what other playwrights do you like?
Oh, well, I love Chekhov.
Okay.
Spent a lot of time reading Sam Shepard when I was a kid.
Sam Shepard, I think, is just amazing. And if you like him, he wrote two novels in the past, like but the 5 years before he in about
Oh,
before he passed away, that if you like his plays, you'll love his novels. It's the same stuff. It's the same language. It's the same character.
wow.
It's like Barry Child in long form.
The guy I love, love, love is Mamet. Mamet is
Yeah.
my shit.
Yeah.
My favorite thing of his is this very kind of minor companion piece to Sexual Perversity in Chicago called The Duck Variations.
Yes.
And I just remember I'd never heard of David Mamet. It was like 16 and it got passed out in a class, and just two students reading these parts. It's just so wonderful, the repetition
Yeah.
of the language and the use of punctuation. So yeah, that guy means so much to me.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget my book, Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, that is me, comes out June 25th on Hachette Books. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is one of the guitarists in the band Lamb of God, and this is his memoir. It's a damn good book, if I do say so myself. But again, that book is out June 25th on Hachette Books. You can pre-order it now everywhere, your favorite online bookstore. So be sure to do that. The site, Songwriters on Podcast, contains all of the archived episodes of the podcast. Of course, you can find them on all streaming platforms as well, but they're also on the site. I only have had the podcast for about I don't think even 2 years. Before that, all of the interviews were transcribed, and that took a lot of work. And that's why I started the podcast. So if you want to read the interviews that I did before the podcast, they are on Songwriters on Podcast as well. There are about 200 of them going back to 2010. So check those out. If you want to get a hold of me, Ben at songwritersonprocess.com, or fill out a form on the website. I'm here for your questions, your complaints, your concerns, or your interview suggestions. I'd love getting those as well. So hit me up. I will try to respond. So that's it, everyone. Have a great day and see you next time.